In the previous section, we analyzed how HOA disclosures allocate financial responsibility and statutory cancellation rights. Now we transition into a document that is short in length but powerful in legal effect, the Market Conditions Advisory. This advisory is not about property condition. It is about economic uncertainty, financing volatility, investment risk, and the limits of broker responsibility. In Arizona contract writing practice, this document reinforces that price, appreciation, return on investment, and future market performance are not guarantees. The real estate market is cyclical. No one can predict the future. The advisory begins with a fundamental truth. Real estate markets rise and fall. Financial markets shift. Lending standards tighten and loosen. Interest rates fluctuate. It is impossible to accurately predict what real estate or financial market conditions will be at any given time. Phoenix Metro. Example: a buyer purchases during a competitive seller's market with rapidly rising prices. 6 months later, interest rates increase and values stabilize or soften. The buyer may feel they overpaid. The advisory clarifies that market direction is uncertain and that value fluctuation is a known risk of ownership. This language protects brokers from claims that they guaranteed appreciation or future resale value. Price is a personal decision, not a broker guarantee. The advisory makes clear that the ultimate decision on price rests solely with the buyer and seller. The broker does not determine what a property is worth. The parties evaluate market conditions, financial resources, and personal circumstances to decide what price and terms are acceptable. Scottsdale. Example: a buyer insists on offering above list price in a multiple offer scenario. Later, if the market shifts, that was the buyer's independent decision. The advisory confirms that brokers do not control that risk. Contract writing integration. When buyers waive appraisal contingencies or offer appraisal gap coverage, they are consciously assuming risk based on their assessment of market conditions. Risk tolerance and waiver of contingencies. The advisory specifically warns that waiving contingencies, rights, or warranties in the contract may have adverse consequences. Buyers and sellers must carefully deliberate how much risk they are willing to assume. Chandler. Example: a buyer waives the appraisal contingency in order to win a bidding war. If the appraisal comes in low, the buyer may be required to bring additional cash or risk losing earnest money. The advisory reinforces that this risk was knowingly assumed. Mesa. Example: a seller accepts a contingent offer dependent on buyer sale of another property. If that sale fails, the seller experiences delay. That risk is part of negotiated terms. The advisory creates a record that both parties acknowledge and accept transactional risk. Investment performance is not guaranteed. The advisory states that buyer and seller assume all responsibility should return on investment, tax consequences, credit effects, or financing terms not meet expectations. This is critical in Arizona, where many buyers view property as both residence and investment. Brokers are not financial advisors. Gilbert Rental. Example: an investor purchases a property expecting rental rates to increase. If rents stabilize or decline, that is market risk. The broker did not guarantee return. Broker limitation. No financial, legal, or tax advice. The advisory clearly states that brokers do not provide financial, legal, or tax advice and are not qualified to do so. Brokers make no representation regarding return on investment, tax consequences, or financing structure. This aligns directly with AAC R428-1101, requiring licensees to exercise reasonable care while staying within the scope of licensure. Professional boundary standard. Explain market data. Explain contract terms. Encourage professional consultation. Avoid predicting appreciation. Avoid giving tax or legal advice. Phoenix example. A buyer asks whether they should form an LLC for tax purposes before purchasing. The proper response is to recommend consultation with a tax advisor or attorney. Why this advisory matters in litigation prevention. Many post-closing disputes arise from unmet expectations, not misrepresentation. When buyers believe a property would definitely increase in value, or sellers believe they could easily refinance later, disappointment can lead to blame. The market conditions advisory documents that markets fluctuate, financing terms change, risk is assumed voluntarily, broker did not guarantee outcomes. This document becomes a risk management shield in the broker's file. Contract writing integration, market conditions and appraisal strategy. This advisory pairs directly with appraisal contingency language. In rapidly changing markets, appraisals may lag contract price. Buyers must decide whether to include appraisal gap language or maintain cancellation rights. Professional example. In a competitive Queen Creek subdivision, buyers routinely offer appraisal gap coverage of $10,000 to $20,000. The advisory ensures that if the appraisal falls short, the buyer understood market volatility risk. Course discussions with answers. Discussion question. Why does the market conditions advisory emphasize that markets are cyclical? Answer. To clarify that property values and financing terms can rise or fall unpredictably, and that neither party can rely on future appreciation or stable lending conditions as a guarantee. Discussion question. If a buyer waives the appraisal contingency in a competitive market and the appraisal comes in low, who assumes the risk? Answer. The buyer assumes the risk because waiver of contingencies is a voluntary contractual decision acknowledged under the advisory. Discussion. Question. Why does the advisory state that brokers do not provide tax, legal, or investment advice? Answer. To establish professional boundaries, limit liability, and encourage parties to consult qualified professionals for specialized financial or legal guidance.